Welcome to GS Core and in our today's initiative of One Day One Answer program, the topic for economy will be GDP. And in this part, we'll be following our old method, that is, we'll be asking the questions from the topic, such as what is GDP, why we require GDP, who is calculating the GDP, and who uses this GDP data, and how to calculate the GDP, or which method to use to calculate the GDP. So we'll be proceeding by our questions. So first of all, our questions will be, what is GDP? We'll be discussing about it. When is GDP reported? Or when are the GDP figures released, we can say. Next, where where is GDP calculated and what are the different methods used? Next question, why? Why is GDP that much important for us? Next, who uses the GDP data? And then we'll have our last question regarding GDP, that how is GDP calculated. So we'll start with our first question, that is, what is GDP and what does it measure? And in this part, we'll be talking about the definition of the GDP. So GDP is the total or the final value of all the goods and services produced in a country during a period of 1 year. So it has a boundary, gross domestic production. So territory word is associated with it. Let us take an example. If the production is happening in New Delhi, New Delhi is part of India. So all the production activity, goods and services that are bought and sold in New Delhi will be included in India's GDP. If the foreigners are working in those factories also, their income will also be a part of India's GDP, because GDP definition talks about the word domestic, and domestic over here refers to the territory part. So GDP is roughly telling about the nation economic activity or the health of the economy. So we'll be talking about the definition. Final value of all goods and services produced in a country during a period of 1 year. So roughly there are different websites and they're putting different data, because each and every organization will use different kind of calculation method. That's why on various websites you are going to see different data. World Bank will show a different data, RBI will use a different data, Ministry of Stats will use a different data, World Bank, IMF, or United Nations, they are going to use a different data, different calculation method. That's why on websites there are different data. So if we talk about roughly about the India's GDP in 2025, India's GDP will be more than $4 trillion. It will be more than $4 trillion, and right now we see sometimes India's GDP increases or decreases also. On the top it is USC GDP, roughly around $19 trillion. Then it is China, $14 trillion. Then it is Japan is there, $5 trillion. Germany is there, 4.5. Then India is there, $4 trillion. And then Britain is there in 3.8 or $3.5 trillion. Okay. Now, next question is our next question, when are GDP figures released and what is the frequency of these reports? How often these reports are coming out? So GDP figures are released on quarterly basis also and annually basis also. And Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation is there, and under that we see CSO is there, Central Statistical Organization, that is releasing the GDP data quarterly basis. And it is also talking about the GDP growth rate is there, how much growth rate in a quarter that India has performed or not performed. So during the COVID year 2020s, after that we see in 2022 and 23, India growth rate increased quite high, and we have really bounced back from the COVID time period. So in this part we'll be writing about MOSPI, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and under that we have CSO, Central Statistical Organization. Then our next question is where? Where is GDP calculated and what are the different methods that we are going to use? So for this part, GDP method is calculated by the national agencies such as MOSPI. And in this part, we'll be using three types of methods such as income method is there, product method is there, and then we see expenditure method. Hypothetically, if we see all these three methods will give the same result. Suppose a person is working and due to that work, he is able to get 100 rupees. So total national income, if we combine, will be 100. So in income method, we are combining all the incomes that we get from the source of method, such as rent is there, investment is there, profit is there, income is there. And right now in this case, suppose the total income is coming is from the income part, that is 100 rupees. So national income will be 100. And in expenditure method, we are using the expenditure that he's in this expenditure method, we are calculating all the expenditure done by the agencies and the person. In the expenditure method, the formula we use is C plus I plus G plus X minus M. C is consumption of consumer, G is government expenditure, I is investment, X is your exports, and M is your imports. So in this part, if this person spends 100 rupees for purchasing any product, we see according to expenditure method, the result or national income is 100 rupees. And if he is purchasing that product and the cost of that product is 100 rupees, so according to the product method also, the GDP will be same. So this is a hypothetical method, but in reality we see there is minor fluctuations in the data we get. So as of 2024, we are using more of a expenditure method because expenditure accounts for roughly around 60% of the total GDP. That's why we are more focusing on this expenditure method. Then our next question is why? Why is GDP an important indicator to calculate the economy? Or for this part, we can talk about that it is telling about the economic performance of the country, how the economy is performing, what is the health of your economy, is it going down or it is going up. It will also tell about the production level in your economy, how much production your country has done according to the past year or within this year. It will be telling about these results. And with this data, we can say the policy makers are able to make informed decisions regarding how to proceed in next year or in next quarter. So they will be able to make the monetary policy, they will be able to make the fiscal policy. Like one example, we can say if the GDP is rising, we can say that the economy is growing. And if we say if the GDP numbers are going down, we see your economy is in a problematic situation such as recession can be there. IMF, International Monetary Fund, they have predicted that in 2024-25, India's GDP growth rate will be roughly around 7%. So it is telling about economic health, and IMF is saying that roughly around 7% in 2024-25. Our next question is who uses this GDP data? For whom it is quite important? For us or for a common citizen? Let us see. So GDP data is utilized by various stakeholders and it is quite important for them. And it does not include only the government part. It includes the government, it includes your investors, it includes international organization also, and you as an individual, it is also a part of you. So lot many organizations are there. If we talk about one example such as investors, so they will be utilizing this data regarding the GDP growth rate and then they will be investing in that country. If the GDP numbers are going up, investors will be quite happy to invest in that country. So more number of FDI will come to your country if your GDP is performing well. And India is among the fastest growing country in the world. So that's why investor confidence is quite high in the Indian economy. As we have seen post-COVID period, there is more increase of the FDI in India because India's economy has recovered really good. So it is individuals, then government, investors, international organizations are there. For them, it is quite important. Our next question, how is this GDP calculated and what are the factors that are considered for its uh, calculations? Right now, we are using expenditure method and formula for that is C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Okay. C is your consumption of consumer, I is investment, G is government expenditure, X is your exports and M are your imports. So in India, we see household consumption is quite high, government expenditure is also high, capital investment is also high. That's why we see we are using this expenditure method. So this was information regarding the GDP part. Now let us proceed to our next part, that is the topic, the question that has come into our mains examination in UPSC. And in this exam, in this paper, he was asking about GDP potential. Define potential GDP and explain its determinants, explain its factors. Then, what are the factors that have been inhibiting or stopping India's growth from realizing its full potential? Suppose my potential to study is for 12 hours, and if I am only able to study for 8 hours, it means that I am not reaching my potential. There has to be something that is stopping my potential from reaching from 8 to 12 hours. So, what is that part? So, similarly, in this part, we see potential GDP will be your 12 hours, and we have to tell what are the factors that can lead to 12 hours of study. Then, in the second part, it is talking about what are the factors that are stopping me from reaching the 12. Right now I'm studying it. What is the things that are required or what are the things that have stopped me from reaching the 12 hours? So let us see in this part. First of all, in the introduction, we will be talking about GDP potential. That it refers to maximum output an economy can produce when it fully utilizes its resources such as land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, technology without any inflation. So without any increase in prices or inflation, we are able to maximize our resources. So economy, productivity, capacity under ideal conditions, this GDP potential is talking about. Then if we talk about the factors of GDP potential, factors can be labor force, quality, quantity is required along with the quality will be able to reach the GDP potential. So skilled workforce is required to enhance the productivity and to reach the maximum output. Then next part will be capital stock. In capital stock, we see physical capital is required, such as machinery, infrastructure, factories, buildings, and along with physical capital, we see human capital is also required, such as education skills. And with these abilities, we'll be able to produce a better and efficient goods and the services part. Next is technology and innovation. So, in technology and innovation, if we are able to improve our output with the same amount of input or raw material that we have provided, and with suppose I had 10 kg of raw material, with that 10 kg of raw material, I am able to make 80 pens. If I am able to improve my efficiency of my labor, my machines, my technology, my innovation, I am able to produce 100 pens. That is the maximum output. So that will be the potential GDP. So in this, technology and innovation help in improving our output part. Then natural resources can be there. In natural resources, efficient utilization of our existing resources can be there. Land can be there, minerals can be there, energy can be there that can be used to produce efficient amount of energy and resources. Then institutional framework. Institutional framework can be the rules and regulations in your country, policy making, property right regulations, environmental rule. All such things are quite important to reach the GDP potential. Then one more thing we can add is uh, R&D, research and development in your country. If the government is promoting R&D and if the lot of competition is there and that competition fostering the innovation, so it will lead to development of new technologies and long-term productive capacity will be created. Now let us focus on the second part, that is it is talking about the factors that is stopping them from reaching the GDP potential. In this part, you can talk about lot factors such as skill gap in labor force is there. The skills that are required by the industry is not being taught by the academics. So unemployment rate is quite high in that part. Inadequate infrastructure is there in terms of the land, rail, roadways, corridor that is not there. Urban areas are not developed. So these things are hindering the development part. These things are hindering the logistic part. So things we can write is skill gap, inadequate infrastructure is there. Then we can talk about low investment in the human capital is there. We are not able to improve the quality of the healthcare part. We are not able to improve the quality of the skills that is required. And in terms of the education also, we are lacking behind. Uh, then regulatory bottleneck in terms of the administration and the bureaucracy part is there. Too much of following of rules regulation is there. Red tapeism is there. Delay in projects getting approval and environmental clearances are there. So all these things are halting the development part. So investment in human capital, then bureaucracy is there. Then limited access to credit and finance is there. Small companies are not able to get funds easily. The rising problem of NPA is there, and cheap access to affordable credit is not there. So all these problems are leading to further dropping down of the potential GDP numbers. Then next point we can talk about is unavailability of the power supply and the environmental constraint is there. Water scarcity is there, pollution is there, and cheaper access to the electricity is not available. So we will not be able to reach to the GDP potential. Limited access to finance and credit. Then we can say unavailability of power supply and clearance. Then we can talk about inefficiency of the public sector enterprises. While the private sector is going quite well, but the public sector, it is we are seeing a downfall in those sector. Inefficiencies, their good quality of products are not being made. So that is one problem. Then too much dependency on the agriculture is there, and we see low productivity in the agriculture because their farmers are not using the machines, they are not using the innovative seeds, and we can say inadequate infrastructure facilities in the rural areas is also one of the problems. Then we can talk about the some solution and data with this part. We can talk about the skill development program launched by the government. Lot number of programs data launched by the government such as Make in India, Made in India, Skill India, Stand Up India. All those programs are helping us to reach the GDP potential. Such as National Skill Development Mission was launched, and roughly around it aimed to train around 500 million people by 2022, but still challenges are remaining and we are not able to reach to that potential. In terms of the infrastructure also, government promised that in financial year 2022 we are going to spend roughly around 10 lakh crore rupees for capital expenditure part, but still infrastructure gaps are existing. And then we can end our conclusion by the words of Raghuram Rajan, former RBI governor, and he is saying that for India to unlock its potential GDP, it must focus on reducing inequalities, improving infrastructure, and creating a conducive environment for the growth, private sector growth. So this is how you have to write this answer. Thank you, everyone.